I'm here to share and discuss forensic science, and I'm experimenting this new thing with you. Welcome to the world of forensic science. Ever since you have taken this subject, criminology and forensic science, as your study in your degree, you have been wondering what this forensic science is. And here it is in front of you. The word forensic is derived from the Latin forensis, meaning market place or forum. During the Romans, any criminal charge would mean presenting the case before the people, that is, marketplace or public forum or public discussion. I think you might have seen in the old movies where during a kingship, if anybody commits any crime, would be brought into a place meant for this in front of the public. They used to discuss what this person has done, what wrong has he committed. And after thorough discussion, he would be punished in front of the public themselves. Okay, let's go on. There must be two things in a crime. The number one is the accused, or the criminal, or the perpetrator, or the culprit. Number two is the accuser, that is, the victim. Here, during the Roman times, the accused and the accuser were both given chances to narrate their stories, tell what they have gone through. Number two is whoever is narrating wonderfully would get the benefit. That means in the forum, in front of the public, both the accused and the accusers were given the chance to narrate their stories or the argument to defend their statements. Whoever whoever is convincing the public by narrating their stories, their argument with justification would be at the upper hand. As a result, the case would be decided in favor of the individual who gives the best narration and the argument and justification delivery. Let us go to the next slide. Humans may lie or change their statements, but physical evidences or material evidences never lie. That is what this forensic science is all about. In the modern times, the term forensics is now replaced by the word forensic science. Yeah, that is, from marketplace or the forum, it has moved to the laboratories. And from better presentation of the stories, to better use of science and technology to deliver justice without any flaws. Forensics consists of a wide body of scientific techniques that are used in helping to solve crimes today. Let us go with the definition of forensic science. Let us understand what is forensic science through the definition. Forensic science is a body of knowledge taken or borrowed from all natural or pure sciences in the administration of law and delivering justice. Every knowledge or subject having forensic as prefix means that knowledge is meant to be used in the administration of law and deliver justice. It may be either civil or criminal cases. So, any science used for the purpose of the law is a forensic science. And in the next slide, we can see the subject dealt with this field. Below are the various subjects or the sciences coming under forensic science. And those are forensic medicine, forensic engineering, forensic anthropology, forensic chemistry, forensic physics, forensic biology, forensic toxicology, forensic entomology, forensic psychology, wildlife forensic, forensic psychiatry, and many others to name. This is not going to end here. It has many branches under it. Let us know the contributors for the development of this forensic science, and whoever is contributing are known as pioneers. Let us know about the pioneers of forensic science. There are many contributors for the development of this subject, forensic science. Here are the few names on the list below, which you can see on the slide. Number 1 is Marshall Malfaghi. Number 2 is Carl Landsteiner. Number 3, Leoni Lattice, Dr. Calvin Goddard, Edmund Luckard, Hans Gross, Matthew Orfila, Alphonse Bertillon, Osborne, Alec John Jeffrey, Kliakhoff, John Evangelist Perkins, Dr. Henry Foss, Francis Galton, Sir William James Herschel, Edward Richard Henry, and the list is endless. Let us move to the next slide to know what Mr. Malfaghi has contributed. Born on 10th March 1628, and he worked as a professor of anatomy at the University of Bologna, Italy. In 1686, after studying a lot of fingerprints, Marcello Malfaghi noted fingerprint ridges, spirals, and loops in his treatise. A layer of skin was named after him, that is, Malfaghi layer, which is appropriately 1.8 mm thick, millimeter thick. No mention of friction ridge, skin's uniqueness, or permanence was made by Malfaghi, and he died in November 1694. Mr. Perkins was born in the year 1787. He was an anatomy professor in the University of Breslau. In the year 1823, evangelist Perkins published his thesis discussing nine fingerprints, that is, nine fingerprint patterns. Perkins made no mention of the value of patterns for personal identification. It is not that Perkins, it is Malfigi as well. No mention of friction, ridge, skin's uniqueness or permanence. Both Malfigi and Perkins, they just studied it. They let the world know something is there in the palm, in the fingers, which is very different. They made the world know it through their work, through their studies, but they never said any importance of that. Whereas Sir William James Herschel, who was working as a chief magistrate in the Hooghly district of India, he first used fingerprints on native contracts. Mr. Herschel in the beginning started taking impressions for the purpose of frightening these locals who made contact with him, who entered into an agreement, who made contact. On a whim and without a thought toward personal identification, his first contract was with Rajadhar Kunai, a local businessman. Later on, he made a habit of requiring palm prints and later simply the prints of the right index and middle fingers on every contract made with the locals. So from palm, he started taking only the prints of right and the middle fingers, right index and middle fingers. And he impressed his handprint on a contract. As the days went by, fingerprint collection grew. It was accumulated. Only then he began to realize the inked impression could indeed prove or disprove identity. By this, taking the impressions on the contract and putting his impression on the contract, he made the locals to believe that personal contact with the document made the contract or the agreement more binding than if they had simply signed on it. So now he made them to believe that they cannot cheat because they have put their impressions on the contract. That is the contribution of Mr. Herschel, which even made people to do research on this. Dr. Henry Foss. Dr. Henry Foss was the British surgeon in Japan, and in during the 1870s, after noticing finger marks on specimens of prehistoric pottery, he took up the study of skin furrows. See, Japanese and Chinese, they have a history of keeping their old culture. They follow even today. So while he was working there, he found a pot where it had the fingerprint as a mark of authentication, I believe. So only then he started to study this skin structure. Fowles not only recognized the importance of fingerprints as a means of identification, but he devised a method of classification as well. He is also credited with the first latent print identification, a greasy fingerprint deposited on an alcohol bottle. Henry Foss discussed fingerprints as a means of personal identification and the use of printer's ink as a method for recording such fingerprints. Hats off to him for this contribution, because even today at the labs, for better impressions of suspected or the culprits is taken using this printer ink, which gives you a very clear picture. The next is Sir Francis Galton. Born on 1822, he did pioneering work in the field of fingerprint sciences. He developed a methodology of classifying fingerprints for filing after studying a lot of fingerprints. He did an extensive study on fingerprints. Later on, he published a book on fingerprints and said that fingerprint considered to be a conclusive proof because of its uniqueness. Because of its uniqueness. Next person is Alphonse Bertillon. He was a clerk in the prefecture of police in Paris. In 1882, Bertillon devised a scientific method of personal identification of criminals. He devised this scientific method of personal identification because he found by himself that police have committed mistaken of identity. So innocent was put behind bars, whereas the perpetrator was left out because of mistaken identity. For the first time, he developed a method known as anthropometry or the Bertillon system, using measurements of parts of the body. And this system included measurements such as head length, head width, length of the middle finger, length of the left foot, and length of the forearm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. It was a systematic procedure of taking a series of body measurements as a means of identification of uniqueness. Bertillon also established a system of photographing faces, what became to be known as mug shots. And in 1888, Bertillon was made chief of the newly created Department of Judicial Identity, where he used anthropometry as the primary means of identification. And the next pioneer is Calvin Goddard. Calvin Goddard, in the year 1925, co established the first significant institution devoted to firearms examination, the Bureau of Forensic Ballistics in New York, and, and developed the science of identifying fired bullets and empty cartridge cases, known as forensic ballistics. Goddard proved that no two revolvers are made exactly alike and that every weapon makes characteristic marks on a bullet and a cartridge shell, and that they are the same every time that particular gun is fired. This is where he perfected the comparison microscope for ballistics research. He utilized the comparison microscope to identify that whether a crime bullet matches with that of test fired bullets from the suspect's weapon. Also, he showed that a bullet taken from a body of a murder victim can be identified as having been fired from a specific gun because of marks the gun has left on test bullets. Both test bullets and the bullet found at the crime scene were compared using the comparison microscope. When it compared, if the marks are similar or identical, obviously it has to be similar and identical. If they are similar, that means that bullet is from that particular weapon or the gun because of his contribution. It helped many investigators. In 1927, Goddard was brought in to help investigators with the Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Bartolomeo Vanzetti robbery murder case in Massachusetts. Here, Goddard he compared bullets fired from Sacco's revolver with the bullets found at the crime scene. He confirmed that one of the bullets recovered from the scene had been fired from Sacco's gun. Goddard's findings were retested in 1961 and 1983 in the span of 2 decades, and the results were confirmed each time. Sacco and Vanzetti died in the electric chair on August 23, 1927, because of Goddard's contribution. They were convicted. The next pioneer is Leoni Lattice. Lattice was the forensic serologist who, in 1915, developed a method for restoring dried blood samples so they could be tested for blood type, that is, A, B, AB, and O. He successfully developed a method, the antibody test, for assigning samples to each of the major blood types. In 1932, Lattice developed a method for determining blood type from a dry sample. In the year much before this, in the year 1901, he published a paper describing the modern method of categorizing blood groups. His This contribution has helped the investigators to identify and link the perpetrator or the culprit to the crime and the judicial system to deliver justice worldwide. Next pioneer is Edmund Luckard. Dr. Edmund Luckard was a French criminologist, the pioneer in forensic science, who became known as the Sherlock Holmes of France. It is Mr. Edmund Luckard who formulated the basic principle of forensic science, and that is principle of exchange, meaning he elaborated that every contact leaves a trace, and this principle later became to known as Luckard's exchange principle. Law enforcement agencies across the world today is depending on the exchange principle, which is the fundamental principle formulated by Luckard, meaning every contact leaves a trace, any contact for it. Thus, no perpetrator can leave the scene of crime without leaving a trace. But again, it is left to the IO, that is investigation officer, his capacity, investigating officer's capacity of tracing the contact which the perpetrator has left at the crime scene. And there are so many other pioneers which might be discussed later classes or the video. Till then, I take a leave from you. Hope I have made it simple for you to know what is forensic science and its pioneers who have contributed for the development of this subject, forensic science. Thank you.